yes, I did give in and cut off all my hair. I remembered some things that I'd forgotten while my hair was growing. For example, I have one little spot that hasn't gone gray yet, which makes me think that this hair flipped down here, but no, it's actually just a little spot that has decided not to go gray. This whole part here photographs clear in pictures, which it's not, it's blatantly gray hair. But if you take a camera, or specifically my iPad camera, towards it, clear. So I look like I have this bald patch at the top of everything. Fantastic. But otherwise, I feel 1,000 times better. And growing out my hair was a disaster of an experiment. Or at least growing out the sides was terrible. And I don't know how to do it without losing my mind. So it's back to this. I feel much better about it. Don't ask me what's up with it. It's just one of those things about how I look. Okay, let's talk about some books. I have some books to talk about. Actually, they're all good books. I read like a book, an actual book in my hands book for my book club. One of the things that we decided to do differently this year is that we are only reading books that we have on our to be read shelves, our TBRs. And for some people, that's just like books they have on a list. Like, oh, I always meant to get to that. But for me, it's literal physical books in my house. I have a list every year, not a list, but like a goal every year of reading 50 of them out of my house. And when I mean out, I mean like either get the heck out of my house or move from the room of books. There are 3 bookcases and there are more of boxes in the attic of books that are just books I have not read yet, and either get the heck out of my house, be given away, be put into an auction, be whatever, or go onto the shelf of, my God, I'm keeping you, you're so good, I love you so much. And I do that, I do that every year, 50, and I pretty much hit 50. And some years it's really silly, like I'll spend the last like couple of days of the year like reading from a giant pile of comic books that I've collected over the years from like free comic book days that I've just never gotten to. And the comic book tables at conferences, Image and Diamond Distributors and things like that, just like piles. I have like piles of comics, piles of books in the attic. And I only have right now 4 bookcases of books that I've kept. 4.5. And some of them are like specifically for projects that are meant to not necessarily stay in my home when the projects are done. Like one of them is for the memoir that I'm working on right now. Those are the Harlequins that I read when I was younger. 50 per year at a time. Understanding that I'm going to get distracted and I'm going to read probably 200 to 400 books a year, of which 50 need to be things that are in my house. So by making 12 of them off of my shelf from my book club, I could vote to manipulate which books were coming off. And that's actually really, really fun. It was really fun to pick topics. It was really fun to sort the books. This is like hardcore book nerd stuff. It was really fun to choose what themes, because we do themes no matter what. We do themes and then we pick selections. And so this year we have a list of 12 themes. Things like the oldest book on your shelf by when you added it to your to be read shelf. And then the oldest book on your shelf by date of publication. These were options. Options like just what's the prettiest covered book that you've got there? Read that one. And it's silly, but like it definitely is getting me to read those books that have been sitting around that I chose because I wanted to read them. But when it comes down to picking a book off the shelf, I'm literally just picking the ones by the authors that I know, that I love. Or I'll just go over there and I'll be like, I just want to take something off the shelf and know that I'm going to read it within like 3 hours or 4 hours or whatever, and I'm just going to pull it and I'm going to be done. So I'll pick like a romance, or I'll pick a YA. And then some of those books that are really cool to me have just been sitting there on that shelf. Now here's the problem. There was a whole ass pandemic. During that time, I had difficulty with concentration and reading. So, yeah, it became more difficult for me to read heavier, longer books, longer paragraphs, especially point of view changes. I would just like put down the book and just like wander, which is not something that I've ever done before. So this push was just like a project, a fun project. And it's my book club. I love them. I've been doing this for like 10 years, more. However, like I picked up this book, this month's book. The theme was next in the series. So all the books that were, you know, in a series, and I grabbed the next one, and I just haven't gotten to it yet. They all went into a cube on my calyx in the February, March, April cube, you know, and I pick a book, Mira Grant, the next Parasitology. It's because I watched Vibes. Parasitology book, the second one. And I'm reading it, and it is either that I'm not used to having a paper book in my hands, or it is a way denser book than I was expecting. Because I've been reading her Seanan McGuire books lately, and they're really fast. And Mira Grant is a little bit, I think, heavier probably. But then the last one I read of hers was much more of a fast-paced, why isn't this a movie yet thriller. So I'm like expecting more of the thriller thing, and it's not. I mean, it does feel like you could probably turn it into a movie, but in terms of like what's actually going on, there's a lot going on there. And so I thought I was getting this like, gonna be this like high-paced parasite thriller thing, and instead it was a lot about like what is family and what is identity. And I'm just like, wow. And I haven't read the first one since it came out. So I'm like, oh God, what if I like don't get into it because of that? No, I was fine. She's fine. Like she always writes that you can pick things back up as long as you're like I reread a synopsis and I was like, other than kind of not remembering this one character who I picked up again right away. So yeah, that worked out fine. It's just that it took me longer to read it than I expected. And so I was like, it's fine because the next book on my NetGalley list doesn't come out for 2 weeks. Except that I have the first week of May, there's like 5 or 6 of them. And I'm like, cool, great, all right, fine. Let's dive right back in. And then I start reading Fevered Star. And I'm like, oh yeah, no, this changes point of view all the time. Fudge, because I know what's going to happen with me and changing point of view. I have to put the book down. I have to take a breath. I don't want to walk away. But there's something in my brain that like developed a habit of just setting things down and wanting to walk away between point of view switches. It really sucks. It really sucks. But also it feels like I'm taking this like really deep breath in between. I don't know. Like, and it feels good and natural to do so. But I don't want to actually keep not reading. It almost feels like I need a little bit more time to digest before I move on. Like, you know, like almost like I need a commercial, which is hilarious because since the pandemic, I've grown even more annoyed with anything that has an ad on it. I don't really get what the pandemic did to like rewire certain parts of my brain when it came to reading or taking breaks or resting or whatever. I have no clue. Anyway, so I'm reading Fevered Star. It is, it's like I said, it was a sequel to Black Sun. So this book I read for the Hugos, and I loved it. I loved it. It is it's a fantasy. It is all based sort of on mythology throughout Native people across the Americas, right? So, because we don't say that enough, people who live in the U.S., we always forget that we're like not the only America. We're just the United States in the America, and it was really cool because like, so this book has a very like old school, the first book had a very like old school feel to it in some ways in terms of how it built fantasy. And that made me feel very retro and enjoyed it. But I wanted to read this article because I had been looking up some information on the book to like reacquaint myself with the plot. And it linked to this article about how, sometimes the book is praised for how she built the world because it's very like taking from this culture and taking from this culture and taking from this culture. And some indigenous people were really into that and some weren't. And there was an article about it, but it was behind a paywall. And I'm like, oh, I would love to read that article. But unfortunately, I could not. Because I would like to hear diverse voices talking about diverse voices and what they think about this. Because I don't think that, either argument is going to be wrong. If white people have been making pan-European fantasies for a really long time, then my opinion is, one, I'm not going to take a side, but two, then I couldn't possibly make an argument against it. Like, even if I felt like there was some argument to make, I'm not going to be the person to make it because pan-European like fantasy has existed in literature for ages. So I'm reading this book and I'm like, is this going to be a duology? Because I'm reading this book and like, I feel like, so there's these multiple points of view and two of them are these really cool characters who, from the first book, who are sort of heading towards this fight, collision of some sort, and they're heading towards this thing, and I'm like going, is this a duology? And I literally stopped reading around like, I don't know, 40% or 60% or something, and I'm like looking it up to see if the third book has been announced. Yeah, and it hasn't. So I'm like, oh my god, this could be a duology. So I'm at 96% of the book when I realize this is going to be a trilogy, which is great. You never want your middle book to feel like a middle book, right? So fantastic. Awesome. So I'm reading this book thinking the whole time, oh my gosh, this is going to end here because I feel like this, showdown is going to happen. And then this thing happens at the end of the book, which I'm not going to give away, but this thing happens at the end of the book. And then I feel this sense of catharsis where I'm like, if the author had ended this book here, I would need a couple things wrapped up, but I would be satisfied. Again, not a thing you often hear about a second book. So then I had this really strange feeling of closure, knowing another book was coming, which I have to tell you is this like amazing sense of relief that I am not like clawing at the walls waiting for the next book to come, but instead have like this sense of serenity that I am waiting for the next book, but I'm okay with that. It's really strange. It's a really strange feeling. I can't remember the last time or ever that I have felt this way about a book. And if you have, please tell me, because it was really cool. It was really cool because, like, I will read the third book and I will be happy to read the third book. But what I am not is like upset or anxious to read it. I just feel I'm like ready, but not. I'm good. I'm satisfied in a way that I was not expecting to be. Which, like, there's this other book that I forgot to talk about last time, which I was almost going to forget to talk about this time because it's not in my notes, because I started making notes now like a grown-up. And actually, this is exactly the way that I felt about the Severance finale. Because the second to last episode of Severance, which is a show on Apple TV that I love, it felt like, I don't want to say filler, but it felt like it was all set up to the finale. And then I was worried that the finale was going to just be all set up to season 2. And then I didn't feel that way. I actually felt like they handed us a lot of interesting things and then set us up for season 2 in a way that was like super exciting. And oh my God, why can't it be here now? But I had that same like much smaller sense of satisfaction because I am like, please be here right now, season 2. But yeah, no, I did have that, like, a little bit of that relief that that so many things were handed to me when I was expecting just, yeah, I felt better. I felt better than I expected. But the reason that I wanted to talk about Severance very, very quickly is because they do have a book called The Lexington Letter that is free from Apple Books, and it's actually really interesting. It is not necessary reading. I do recommend watching at least a half of the show before you read it. But it is a free download, and yeah, you should read it if you watch the show at all. It's quick, it's free, it's not very long. Yeah, you should do that. Just to let you know, because it's a book thing related to something I like. So you know how I always freak out about how authors' names are pronounced? I am right to do so. So I looked this author's name up on video before I came here. I looked it up on 3 different things. She did not say her name during the introduction of any of them. The people introducing her did, though, which is a nice change. And they said it 2 different ways. She did not correct either of them. So now I'm guessing, because I really need to get this done because of my health. We've had some really crazy weather and I've had some really horrible migraines. So I really am trying to use this in between time to get this video done. So I apologize to this author if I say her name wrong, but I'm going to go with the people who said it the same way 2 times. I'm really hoping that that is the correct way. But yeah, I highly, highly empathize with this poor woman who had to sit on a major television thing, or whichever one of them said it a different way, and listen to her name be said wrong and keep smiling. I know that feeling. So, Jasmine Guillory has a new book coming out on probably May 5th or 3rd or whatever it is, and whatever the first Tuesday in May is, because everybody has a book coming out on the first Tuesday of May. And it is the second in a series of wait for it, adult Disney romance retellings. Yes, if you have not heard of this series, it started with Julie Murphy doing If the Shoe Fits, I believe. I did not get a chance to read that one, but I did get this one on NetGalley. It is called, for some reason, By the Book. Now, you may say, is that a Shakespeare reference? And I may say, is that a Shakespeare reference? But hey, you know what? It's not a Shakespeare-themed book. It is a Beauty and the Beast retelling. Of course it is. Of all the titles you could have used. I don't know. I don't know. So, if you are wondering, maybe there's a line in Beauty and the Beast. I haven't watched it in a while. My child is an adult. I haven't babysat a very little in a while. So I haven't watched Beauty and the Beast in a while. Maybe there's something about By the Book that makes it a good title. I have no idea. But it did sort of confuse me, which sort of is how I felt about the whole book. Is the book cute? Yes. Does it have a bunch of Beauty and the Beast references through it? Yeah, it does, sort of. Yes, like here, there, everywhere. Is it a little weird? It's a little weird. Is it a little obvious? Yes. Is it still cute? Still cute. Does it have sex in it? No, not even the tiniest bit. Let me explain to you how this goes. Tons and tons and tons and tons of food descriptions, which I hear is like her thing, which is totally fine. I am on board and hungry. I have some food issues because of my medication. It makes me not hungry. I love to read about food. I even love to read about food that I don't eat, unless it's about like all the meaty parts. But I don't mind reading about meat in general. Okay, so you've got tons and tons of descriptions about food. You've got a significant amount of descriptions about kissing. What's the sex scene like? Well, close your ears or skip a little bit. I'm about to spoil it for you. You're going to skip about 10 seconds because here it goes. She reached for him. Anyway. All right, it was less than 10 seconds because I speak fast. There's your sex scene. Now, I am not complaining. This is actually a really charming romance that you could give to a teenager. I have some thoughts and feelings, mostly feelings about how that goes. Disney gets a lot of crap about unrealistic standards of romance relationships, consent, kissing people while they're unconscious, locking them up in a tower, which absolutely does not happen here. And then with the sex all off the page, you do not have the ability to discuss things like what is safe sex, what is consent-ish. You have that with the kissing, though. That's pretty good. They don't even discuss consent so much as she's the one who has to kiss him because he is the one who is being considerate of making sure of the power dynamic in their relationship, which I'll discuss in a second. But in terms of being clear of what's going on, no, it is completely fade to black in a fade to black that is the most fade to black I have ever seen fade to black. Again, I do not necessarily have a problem with it. It's fine. This book is PG, verging on G. The only thing that makes it PG is the fact that she is sleeping in his room. So it's not like we don't know that they're having sex. It's just that there is absolutely no sex on the page. There's something about that, though. You know, everybody's been talking about the Disney-fication of Marvel, which has taken the sex all out of, and indeed a lot of the romance out of Marvel and superhero comics, which are basically giant soap operas, or at least they were in the 80s, and, you know, and to this day they can kind of be pretty soapy, but in the 80s especially, they were absolutely soapy. And you know, there was a lot of sex and relationship drama that is just not there, you know, and there's no romance, there's not a lot of sex at all. I mean, there's some insinuated stuff, but like apparently Eternals is the first sex scene in a Marvel movie, and that's like what, like the 27th movie or something like that. Like, so while I am like not discussing the author at all, I think she makes a charming little book that, you know, has that same charm that Beauty and the Beast does. But there's something to be said for like, what is Disney's intent here by creating an adult market and then not making it adult? Do I want a modern day Belle getting railed by a modern day Beast? I mean, that's what the Anne of Green Gables book, Anne of Manhattan, did. And some people loved it and some people hated it. I skipped those pages and really enjoyed the rest of the book. So yeah, I mean, I feel like there's a balance. You can be the person who skips the pages. You can be the person who's mad at the book. You could be the person who loves the book. It can all happen. I don't know. It definitely made me feel away. It made me feel away, but like in the context of Disney. It absolutely didn't make me feel away in the context of the book. It just made the book feel lighter. Even lighter than it already was. And it is very much a beach read. Like, I would say it's the beachiest of all beach reads because some of it takes place on an actual beach. You have Izzy, who is a book-loving assistant editor in New York, and she has ambitions to write herself, and she... Oh, Gaston, okay. And she goes to California to go basically placate this guy who's supposed to be turning in a memoir and hasn't even returned any of their emails. And she ends up at his place helping him through the writing process. And he is incredibly, mostly just defensive about the memoir. He's actually kind of a nice person if you're not talking to him about the writing process. You know, that sort of thing. And there are references here and there to the movie, and some of them are really clever, some of them are just silly, but like in a nice way. It is a nice little book. I just, it's like almost too nice for me. I was just like, okay. I passed a couple hours. It was lovely. I like wish it had been nicer and sunnier out today, because she's like talking about like, haha, I missed the whole winter in New York by staying in California. And I'm like, well, it was 70 yesterday and it's like freezing today. And there's like a frost advisory. Yeah, no, it was cute. I like looking at my notes. I wrote down one thing though, like so the Beast himself is this guy named Beau, and he's this guy, his parents were famous, and so he sort of grew up in the spotlight, and he has a reputation for being like sort of a bratty celebrity kid who's now old enough to know better, but like he also hasn't been seen in a while. I don't know. And so like I'm describing the book to my roommate, and she was like, this doesn't sound like Beauty and the Beast at all. And I'm like, it is though. And she was like, she's like, but he sounds like a man baby. And I'm like, I guess. I don't know. Yeah. He's not, like, if your Beauty and the Beast fantasy is sort of a Beast fantasy, that's not what you're gonna get here. You're actually gonna get something, the deepest part of the book. The deepest part of the book is why Bo is having problems writing the book. And I think that that's actually really well done. The one thing that I do love about romance, that I love to see in romance, is people getting better. Just people in general learning how to deal with their shit. Whether it's learning how to be in a relationship, learning how to forgive themselves or other people, learning how to grow, learning how to get over traumas. I mean, that's my jam. And I think that's what really drew me to romance in the first place. And I think that Bo's story is actually a really good one. And I think it's the strongest part of the book. Izzy's great, but Bo's arc is really nice. It's really nice. Yeah. So I would love to read something else by her, but I don't think I have anything in the house, and so that pushes her to 2023 at least. I swear I'm gonna have a reasonable TBR in 2023. So yeah, that was my 2 weeks in books. I mean, it wasn't, obviously, because I'm still me. I think I actually read a graphic novel in there somewhere. Puttered through something, probably. Who knows what I do, really? I started a new fun book. It's a romance, actually. It'll probably be some horrible trauma book by the time I'm done with forgetting about it. It's just something to keep me from working on my own memoir. But like Bo, I think I'm actually going to take some of the advice in the book to get around to finishing the first draft of my memoir. I'm like so close, and then I keep being like, but it's so traumatic and horrible. I think I just have to do what Bo does. What's that, you ask? Well, you're just going to have to read it to find out. As always, there are referral links in the description. The next couple books I have are a fantasy by a person of color, a queer romance that I think is YA, and I think some short story collections, and everything needs to be done by the first week of May.